I mentioned, my name is James Wall. I'm the Director of Educational Partnership at Seven Generation Games. And I live in Louisiana, South Louisiana to be specific, just outside of Baton Rouge, a little small town called Watson. Lived in Louisiana most all of my life. Spent about the last 20 years or so working in educational technology in some capacity. Let's see, I think, pardon me guys, I'm still new at Zoom. I think I actually forgot to share my slideshow with you guys. Let's pull that up. Maria, can you see my slideshow there? Maria, can you
yes,
see
we can.
We can see it.
Okay,
I was muted.
Oh, yes, I'm muted, but yes.
Sorry about that. All right, so believe it or not, despite that mess up, I've actually worked in educational technology for about 20 years in various capacities. Spent about 6 years in the IT department at LSU in Baton Rouge, specifically in the distance education department. And that was interesting because that was a long time ago. And back then, video conferencing was almost non-existent. It was really a brand new thing. You couldn't really do a desktop video conference like what we're doing now. It required these dedicated T1 lines to the site you were working at, and these really, really expensive, very large pieces of equipment. And so it's been interesting for me to see how far video conferencing and distance education has come over the last 10, 15 years or so. After that, I worked for about 7 years in educational sales and training, specifically with things like interactive whiteboards, multimedia classrooms, document cameras, all sorts of classroom technology. And I was able to do a lot of interaction with a lot of teachers all over the country, doing a lot of training sessions. And it was interesting and eye-opening in a lot of ways to go in and to see the real difference in some situations. You would have some teachers who were extremely comfortable and well-versed with technology, but then right next to them, you would have someone who was completely the opposite. They were intimidated by technology. They really did not know how to use it, what to do with it, and in some cases really didn't want anything to do with it. And so that was always interesting, working with groups like that and trying to make them understand that you really can make use of this, and it can make your life and your students' life a whole lot easier and better. So really for the last 20 years plus, I've also taught kids in an after-school environment, mostly focusing on physical education and character development. And I spent several years writing a monthly magazine column focused on using games to teach martial arts. And I've done presentations all around the country on that topic, seminars and clinics and so forth. You know, I think when we talk about teaching anybody, it's important to know the audience. You need to know who it is that you're talking to. And for most of us, and here in this conference today, that's going to be kids. And as most of you probably also know, kids don't necessarily learn the same way that adults do. And as a martial arts instructor early on in that particular facet of my life, I learned that lesson the hard way, because when I first started teaching kids, I taught them the same way I taught adults, and it failed miserably. They quit all the time. It was a constant turnover because kids don't need to be taught like adults. And when we talk about kids, what is it that they really want to do? You know, just in general terms, what do kids want to do more than anything? Kids at the end of the day just want to have fun. They just want to play. They just want to have a good time. They're not really interested in doing the hard work. They just want to enjoy things. And it gets even harder when we're talking about teaching kids math. So when you talk to kids, the majority of them, and ask them how do they feel about math, yeah, that's usually kind of what you get. I know for me as a kid, that was the reaction you would have gotten from me. Heck, even as a college student, that's the reaction you would have gotten from me with math. It was never my best subject, never a fun subject for me. So we're faced with this challenge of, you know, having to teach kids, particularly these days, in even more challenging environments and situations, and having to teach them a difficult subject like math, and finding ways to try to get them motivated to do work and to even do work outside of class when they maybe aren't being directly supervised and held accountable by a teacher. And so it's even tougher. So as I mentioned earlier, in addition to working for Seven Generation Games, I'm also a judo instructor. And so I work with a lot of kids ages 5 and up. And I use the word work a little bit loosely. We have a lot of fun also, as you can tell right there. So no kids were actually harmed in the making of this PowerPoint slideshow. If you look closely, you'll see she's actually smiling and having a real good time. But I have worked with a lot of kids over the years, have close to 100 kids, in my program right now that I work with, 4 days a week. So it's given me a lot of opportunities to really see what it takes to motivate kids and what works and doesn't work, at least in that setting. And when working on this presentation, it really got me thinking, judo is really a lot like math. And really, this could be said for a lot of sports. Judo in particular is very complex. There are multiple steps in the techniques we learn. It uses its own unique language. And earlier today, Ann Maria was speaking of that just a little bit when she mentioned that a lot of times kids struggle with math, maybe not because they don't know what 6 times 4 is, but maybe they don't understand the terminology that's being used to describe it. So judo and math both definitely have a unique language. In the case of judo, it's Japanese. We learn all the technique names and so forth in Japanese. You have to do the repetition. Ann Maria also spoke to this a little bit. It takes repetition to get good at something. And that's true with martial arts. It's true with math. It's true with most sports. You can't do it just one time and master it. You have to do it over and over. And judo can be painful, no doubt about it. And for people like me, and again, most kids, math can also be a little bit painful at times, unless you're one of those rare people that math just clicks for them and they really like it. It can be a little painful. It can be a little stressful sometimes. So this is just a quick example. On the left is just a page out of a judo textbook, and on the right is 6th grade Common Core vocabulary for like a word wall. And if you look at the judo page, you can see we're using these strange drawings and diagrams and different language. We talk about Shizun Hontai and Hizaguruma and Kazushi and things like that. So if you knew nothing about the Japanese language and nothing about judo, and I was trying to explain this to you, you would have no idea what I'm talking about. And the same thing can be said for some of the terminology we see over here on the right. If you've never been taught what these things are and don't know what they mean, it can be very confusing. And that makes it more intimidating. And that sort of adds to the dilemma that we face in getting kids excited about doing math. So Ann Maria talked about it. I just reiterated how repetition is very important for developing new skills. But we also know repetition is not necessarily fun. So if you're not familiar with judo, it's a martial art where we grab each other and we throw each other down. We pick our opponent up and we throw them onto the ground. And so we do a lot of repetition, getting our body quickly into positions to be able to perform these techniques. And for a lot of places, a lot of schools, a lot of judo clubs, this is what repetition might look like in judo. All right, so effective? Probably so. You can tell that gentleman has developed a tremendous amount of speed and balance and control over his body. He's moving in with a lot of power. He's probably going to be able to very effectively throw his opponent if he chooses to do so. But did it look like much fun? Not so much. And it's kind of that way a lot of times, I think, with math for students. So for me, one of the best ways I've found to keep kids motivated to do judo is to disguise the repetition by using games. And Ann Maria talked about variety of repetition. And this is kind of similar to that. It's related to that, but maybe just a little bit different. But finding ways to make the kids think that they're not actually doing math, or maybe they realize they're doing math, but it's secondary. It's kind of in the back of their mind. On the front of their mind is the fact that, hey, I'm just having fun. I'm enjoying myself. This next clip is just some of my kids in one of my classes, and they're playing a judo game called Judo Freeze Tag. And we typically would play this game at the end of class if they've worked hard enough and behaved themselves. They've earned the right to play a game. So I've already been working them hard for maybe 30, 40, 45 minutes. They're getting tired. They're running out of energy. But when I introduce the concept of a game, suddenly everyone is very energetic. They're ready to go. They find this new burst of life because we're playing a game. Now, in this case, they're running all over the place. And if someone is frozen, the way they get unfrozen is another person comes up and grabs them and does a judo throw, throws them down. And then they're unfrozen. They can keep running and playing. So I'm getting them to run more. They've already worked out 30, 35, 40 minutes or so, but I'm getting more running for cardio. And they're also practicing their judo throws, and they're practicing falling safely when someone throws them. So we're disguising that repetition. They just think they're playing a game. All right, so you kind of get the idea there, just a real short clip. But again, this is at the end of class when I've already worked them really, really hard. They did 15 minutes of warm-ups to begin class. They had another 20 minutes or so of technique work where we taught technique, and they did lots and lots of repetition on those techniques, this pure judo technique. They've done randori, which is our word for sparring. They're tired, man. They're done. They're sweating, they're breathing hard. But again, when I introduce a game, everybody finds new energy and they're running all over the place. So if we can do this with something like judo, I really think that math games can do that same thing for kids. A recent article published by the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics had these things to say about teaching using games. Playing games encourages strategic mathematical thinking as students find different strategies for solving problems and deepen their understanding of numbers. When played repeatedly, games support students' development of computational fluency. Games present opportunities for practice, often without the need for teachers to provide the problems. Teachers can then observe or assess students and work with individuals or small groups of students. And this really ties in particularly well with what we're facing in the upcoming school year, as was mentioned earlier, that it may be a blended situation where the kids may not be in your classroom all the time. They may not be in your classroom at all, or maybe they're only there a couple of days a week. So you're not going to always be there to maybe give them more problems to work on. You're not always going to be there in person to see if they're progressing or not, to be able to make adjustment, give them extra attention or give them extra help. But with some of that data that our games collect, the reports you can look at, you can sort of tell which students are struggling, which ones are needing more help in certain areas. Games support a school-to-home connection. Parents can learn about their children's mathematical thinking by playing games with them at home. Again, always important to have the parents involved, even more important now because a lot of times in this upcoming school year, the kids are going to be home a lot more. So maybe they've got mom or dad or grandma or grandpa or someone else is there at home with them during the day. This might be a way that they can connect and share something. So they're getting some quality time together, but the parents now are also involved a little more, with what their kids are working on. And maybe the parents actually see, if their kids are struggling in a particular area. So I think this has always been important, but I think now it's even more important. So we've talked about how games can help by disguising repetition. Are there other ways kids might benefit from educational games? So games break down tasks. They allow learners to control their navigation of games, and they can adapt to the pace of the learner. So that kind of really means that when I'm playing a game, I go at my pace. I can adapt, I can change. There's usually going to be different difficulty settings on the game. If I'm not really sure about what I'm doing with this particular situation, I can select an easy level and I can play through on easy. And then when my confidence is higher, go back and play again. 70% of teachers said that using educational video games increases student engagement. And 60% of teachers say using digital games helps personalize instruction, better assess knowledge, and collect helpful information. The data and reporting we spoke about earlier. So the way it works in a video game is you put forth effort playing the game and you fail maybe, most of the time, especially if it's the first or second time you played it. So you put forth the effort and you fail. But you're encouraged because you had fun, even though you failed. So you go back and you put in more effort. And you might fail again, but you're still encouraged, maybe even more so, because now you feel really challenged and you really want to beat this level. And so you put even more effort in, and now maybe you succeed. So having it in the form of a game really, in a lot of ways, in a lot of instances, will help the kids to motivate themselves. They're kind of challenging themselves because they want to win. It kind of appeals a little bit to that competitive nature. And ideally, we hope it will be like this in the classroom. And sometimes it can be, but not always. A lot of times the way that they are challenged in a classroom setting is maybe with a test. They know they have a math test coming up on Friday, so they've studied for it, but it's looming over their head. It's this big, scary monster, and they know they only get one shot at it. And if they fail, well, they get a bad grade, and it goes, in the grade book, and they're in trouble at home and all these different things. So it's a little bit of a different scenario. Things to look for in a good video game: it should captivate and engage. It should help teach perseverance and should help teach resilience. You want to get their attention and keep their attention. You want them to learn that it's okay to fail, but to keep going when it gets hard, not give up. You want them to be resilient, to try again and again. And that's an important lesson, not only in math, but I think in life, learning to not give up even when the going gets tough. So educators, you're facing a lot of new and unexpected challenges. Nobody saw this coming. There was no way to prepare for what we are facing now, and that is for everybody. Every business, every employee, every employer, we're all facing this challenge and how to overcome it. I think that games, particularly digital games, have the power to be extremely useful in the world of remote or blended educational content delivery. I think it's really just a matter of embracing that and finding out how you can make the best use of technology and of games. And certainly, we're not the only company or the only source for this type of stuff, but I think we're one of the better ones out there. I think that our games are well designed. I think a lot of thought and care goes into them. They're very thorough and very well thought out, and we actually care about what we do. And as I think it was Anne-Maria or Maria mentioned earlier, our games are also very, very affordable. So it's something that individual teachers or at-home moms or dads that are teaching at home, our schools can actually afford to implement into their curriculum. So if anybody has any questions or comments they'd like to talk about right now, I'm happy to do that. If you have anything after the fact that you want to ask about or just talk to me about, again, I'm James Wall, and that is my email address with 7th Generation Games. Feel free to reach out. I would be happy to offer any useful insights I might be able to. But the overall concept for me, I think, is finding a way to let kids have fun, making it fun. And if you make it fun, they're going to be a lot more encouraged to keep doing it.